This is the first video on the cardiovascular system. In this video, I'm going to be focusing on the heart, its structure and function. The cardiovascular system, which is also called the circulatory system, consists of three parts. We have the heart, the muscular pump that moves the blood through blood vessels. Your heart will contract approximately 2.5 billion times in your lifetime. Then you also have the blood vessels that are in charge of transporting the blood to body cells, and then the blood itself, which carries nutrients and gases to and from the body cells and major organs. In this video, we're going to focus on the heart. There'll be future videos about blood vessels and blood. So the structure of the heart is basically a four-chambered, cone-shaped pump that's about the size of your fist. So if you make your fist, you can see approximately how large your own heart is. It lies inside the thoracic cavity above the diaphragm between the second and fifth ribs. So you can kind of see it here. It's offset a little bit to the left, pointing down towards the left hip. But it basically is lying underneath the sternum, which is why compression of the sternum for CPR will compress the heart and basically imitate the pumping action that the heart is not doing if somebody needs CPR. The heart is covered by 3 layers of tough membranes to protect it and to allow it to move freely within the chest cavity. And then inside the heart, there are various internal valves, which are basically just flaps of connective tissue that help prevent the blood from backflowing and keeps it going in only one direction through the heart. The heart itself has several important functions. Of course, it is receiving oxygenated blood from the lungs and sending it to body cells. It's also receiving deoxygenated blood from body cells and sending it to the lungs to pick up oxygen. As you know from the endocrine system unit, the blood is where the hormones travel around to body cells, and of course your nutrients like glucose and other things that are absorbed from your meals and other important substances are going to be carried through the blood, but they're moved because the heart pumps the blood. The blood is also picking up various metabolic waste products, and so then the heart is pushing that blood to the kidneys or to the lungs through the removal of those waste products. And then finally, the heart is responsible in many ways for maintaining the proper blood pressure that's necessary inside your arteries and veins. This is a view of the external structure of the heart. So notice that the heart has a number of large blood vessels here on the top. So it basically hangs from those blood vessels in the body cavity. There's nothing down here at the bottom tying it in quite the same way. You can see on the outside of the heart, we have a number of arteries and veins. Even though there's blood flowing through the heart muscle itself has got to receive the nutrients from its own artery and vein blood vessel supply. You can see those very clearly on this diagram, and these coronary arteries are the ones that get blocked in a heart attack, and blood then cannot flow to the heart muscle, and the heart muscle dies, which essentially is what's happening in a heart attack. The major blood vessels that you're going to be responsible for knowing are the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava, which are the ones that bring deoxygenated blood from the body cells back to the heart. And then the aorta, which carries oxygenated blood to body cells. And then finally, the pulmonary trunk and the pulmonary arteries and veins, which are carrying blood to and from the lungs. The red and blue coloration that you will see on the diagrams with the various blood vessels and sections of the heart are there just to help you identify how the blood is moving through the heart. Blood is red, various colors of red depending upon whether it's oxygenated or not. And your blood vessels really are sort of a beigeish, brownish color. Let's take a close-up view of the heart wall itself. Cardi is the root word that has to do with things of the heart. And so the innermost layer that's lining these inner chambers of the heart is the endocardium. The muscle layer is the myocardium. Myo, again, refers to muscle. We've seen that one before. Then moving to the outside, we're first going to hit the epicardium, which is actually the visceral layer of a serous membrane known as the pericardium. Serous membranes are double layered membranes with a space in between. One way to think about that is like what would happen if you put your fist into a balloon. There'd be a balloon layer around your fist, and there'd be a space, and there'd be the outside of the balloon. The space is the pericardial cavity. It's filled with fluid, and then surrounding that second layer is the parietal layer of the serous pericardium. And this serous membrane then allows the heart to beat with very little friction occurring because of the fluid inside the pericardial cavity. It can sort of freely move in that space. And then wrapped around the whole thing is the fibrous pericardium. So our three layers are the fibrous pericardium and the two layers of the serous pericardium. There are actually two pathways that the blood flows through, known as circuits, the pulmonary and the systemic circuits. These two loops allow from the blood to go from the body to the heart to the lungs to pick up oxygen, and then from the lungs to the heart to the body to deliver that oxygen to body cells. As I mentioned, blood is red, various tones of red. So oxygenated blood is bright red, as you see here, and then venous blood or deoxygenated blood is dark red. If you've ever given blood for a medical test, you've seen that dark red blood, if you dare look, dark red blood going into the syringe. And when you cut yourself, you're getting basically a mix of the two because you're usually cutting across capillaries, and some of those are carrying oxygenated blood and some are deoxygenated blood. So that blood color is kind of a mix. But blood will not be blue. We just use that color to keep track of things. So how does the blood travel through the heart? It's going to come in from body cells either through the superior venous cava or the inferior venous cava and end up in the chamber known as the right atrium. From then it will flow into the right ventricle. And from the right ventricle, it's going to be pumped through the pulmonary trunk into a pulmonary artery and heading off to the vein. There are flaps of tissue called valves. Here we have the tricuspid valve that's going to prevent backflow. This valve will close off if the blood tries to go up from the ventricle to the atrium. So it only can go from the atrium to the ventricle. The blood comes back into the heart, oxygenated down a pulmonary vein, reaches the left atrium, is pushed down into the left ventricle, and then is pumped out through the largest blood vessel in the body, the aorta, and quickly branching off into various other blood vessels to be carried around to body cells. There is also a immediate artery, coronary artery, right here as the aorta leaves the heart, so that the blood vessels are there to supply the heart muscle itself with that oxygenated blood. Looking at a more realistic appearing diagram, again for these various parts, your right atrium here at the top, the tricuspid valve, basically just flaps of tissue that will be pushed up to cover the opening. They're tied down with some tendons and muscles. The tendons are called chordae tendineae. We have little heart muscles, little muscles within the heart that help contract and keep them tight so that the blood will only flow down. It will never flow up. You can also see that the heart is divided in half by a septum. So the right and left sides, blood normally does not mix across there. So we keep the right side of the heart for deoxygenated blood and the left side of the heart for oxygenated blood. On the left side, your left atrium. On top, you have the mitral valve. Again, little flaps of tissue to close off the left atrium and ventricle. And then the big blood vessels, both the aorta and the pulmonary trunk. You can see there's another set of tissues. These are known as semilunar valves, or like little cups that they prevent blood from flowing down the blood vessels back into the heart. So as if the blood tries to backflow, these little cups will fill and seal off the end of those blood vessels. So we've got the semilunar valves at the end of the blood vessels, and then these leaflet valves, these flaps of tissue between the two chambers on both the right and the left side. So heart muscle is cardiac muscle, one of the three types of muscles we talked about earlier in this course. Like skeletal muscle, it is striated. It'll appear striped once it's stained and under the microscope. And it has a very branched appearance. It's not quite as lined up as skeletal muscle, but we have various branches as it splits off. These branches connect, or these cells, these muscle fibers connect to each other with a special structure called an intercalated disc, and this improves the coordination of the muscle cells. If you put two heart muscle cells next to each other, they will start to beat together, and they're communicating through these intercalated disc sections. The thickness of the muscle in the different chambers of the heart does vary because some parts of the heart just don't have to contract as hard to move the blood. So the atria on the right and left side have the thinnest walls, and then the left ventricle, which is pushing the blood to all parts of your body, is going to have the thickest walls, and the right ventricle is in between. And so the amount of muscle there also will affect how strong that contraction can happen. Here's a picture of a cadaver heart, so you can see how thick this muscle wall is here in the left ventricle. This is your left ventricle, your right ventricle over here, much thinner wall, and then the septum dividing the two down the middle on this side. Looking at the atrium, you've got a much thinner wall there. To check for understanding, ask yourself, can you describe the structure of the heart, including the names of the four chambers, the names of the internal valves, and the major blood vessels that are coming directly off the heart? Can you list the functions of the heart and describe how these functions are essential for survival? And can you trace the path of blood through the heart that will result in the deoxygenated blood becoming oxygenated?